Have you ever questioned what you've been told about God and religion? What if the Bible, the most sacred text in history, was never meant to be controlled? What if the true message of the Bible has been manipulated, censored, and hidden from you for centuries? What if the divine truth that religions have preached was not the whole story? What if the churches and governments, the very institutions you trust to interpret God's word, have been actively suppressing the full truth from the Bible? This video will unveil the hidden truths that religious authorities don't want you to know. We're going to explore how certain books, teachings, and prophecies were removed, altered, or covered up to keep you in the dark about the true nature of God, creation, and your divine potential. Let's start with one of the most shocking revelations. The Bible, as it stands today, has been carefully curated, edited, and rewritten by those in power. The original scriptures, the ones that Jesus himself read, contained far more than we are taught in church. You might be shocked to learn that the early church didn't simply preserve and pass down the Bible. They controlled it, shaped it, and excluded certain books to maintain control over the people. Early Christian leaders were highly selective about which scriptures they allowed in the official canon. The Council of Nicaea, convened by Emperor Constantine in 325 AD, was one of the key moments when the Bible was altered. This wasn't just a theological meeting. It was a political gathering. Constantine wanted a unified religion to unite his empire, and the church leaders had to agree on a Bible that served the empire's goals. What does that mean? The books that didn't align with the political and religious power structures were excluded. Books like the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Judas, and the Book of Enoch, texts that were considered dangerous because they didn't align with the established narrative, were thrown out of the Bible. Why were these books considered dangerous? Because they didn't fit the church's narrative of control. The Gospel of Mary, for instance, shows Mary Magdalene not just as a follower of Jesus, but as a spiritual equal, possessing secret teachings that could have overturned the patriarchal authority of the church. Women could have been seen as spiritual leaders in their own right, not just followers. This would have threatened the very foundation of church power, so the book was hidden away. Then there's the Book of Enoch, a text quoted by Jesus in the New Testament, but excluded from the Bible. Why? Because it describes a world where fallen angels, the Watchers, descended from heaven, taught humans forbidden knowledge, and fathered the Nephilim, giants who corrupted humanity. This was a direct challenge to the church's image of a perfect, uncontaminated creation. In fact, the Book of Enoch offers a radically different view of humanity's origins, one that would make the idea of original sin seem trivial. The text describes a divine rebellion, where angels defy God's commands, leading to the corruption of mankind, an idea that didn't fit into the orthodox Christian teachings of salvation through Jesus alone. And what about the Gospel of Judas? This controversial gospel portrays Judas Iscariot not as a betrayer, but as the one disciple who truly understood Jesus' mission. According to this gospel, Jesus asked Judas to betray him, as part of a divine plan that would fulfill the prophecy of salvation. This doesn't fit with the traditional narrative of Judas being the villain, does it? The church rejected this gospel for centuries, labeling it as heretical because it questioned the foundational narrative of Jesus' death. The exclusion of these texts is just the tip of the iceberg. Over the centuries, many spiritual truths have been buried, and the Bible was reconstructed in a way that benefited those in power. You might be wondering, why did they do it? Why did the church and governments go to such lengths to alter the Bible? The answer is simple: control. Religions, especially the ones connected to political powers, understand that the truth is power. If people understood their true divine nature, if they realized that they were more than just sinners in need of salvation, the entire religious system would collapse. That's why they hid the Gnostic texts, the teachings that emphasized personal enlightenment and the ability to access divine knowledge directly. These texts, like the Pistis Sophia, teach that you are already divine, and that true salvation comes from awakening to your own divine potential. But the church didn't want that. The church and governments didn't want you to know that you are divine, because that would have meant that they were no longer in control. This manipulation didn't end in the past. It's still happening today. The Bible, as we know it, continues to be controlled, interpreted, and twisted by those in power. The truth about God, about creation, and about humanity's divine potential is still being suppressed by institutions that have a vested interest in keeping people in the dark. As we continue uncovering the hidden truths about the Bible, let's take a closer look at how the alterations and manipulations were not just about the content of the texts, but about who controlled the narrative of human spirituality. For centuries, the church and political leaders kept the Bible and spiritual knowledge locked away from the masses. They feared that unfiltered access to the sacred scriptures would awaken the divine potential within people, something that could topple empires and challenge their control over the masses. At the heart of this cover-up was a deliberate suppression of spiritual freedom. The church, in particular, was worried that if people realized their true spiritual nature, they would no longer be submissive to the teachings of religious authorities. Take, for example, the Book of Jubilees, a text that has been largely excluded from the Bible. The book offers a very different interpretation of Genesis and offers details about the creation of humanity. According to the book, humanity was created with a divine purpose and was meant to inherit a divine kingdom, not a world filled with suffering and sin. This directly contradicts the church's narrative of humanity as fallen beings who need to be saved through Christ's sacrifice. The suppression of this book was not an accident. It was an act of control. The idea that humanity is divine and capable of awakening to its true potential is one of the greatest threats to any system that relies on obedience and fear to maintain power. The Gnostic Gospels and texts like the Apocryphon of John paint a similar picture. These texts describe the creation of the world not as a simple act of divine benevolence, but as the result of a cosmic rebellion. The Gnostics believed that the material world was created by a false god, Yaldabaoth, and that humanity was meant to escape the prison of the flesh and return to the divine realm. This teaching was dangerous because it suggested that God wasn't just a distant, powerful ruler, but that the divine was inside each individual, waiting to be awakened. In these hidden books, the path to salvation isn't about following rules or doctrines. It's about awakening the divine light within you, remembering your true spiritual identity, and reconnecting with the source of all creation. This kind of spirituality is free, personal, and beyond the control of any religious institution. No wonder it was banned. The early Christian leaders understood that if people could access the divine within themselves, they wouldn't need the church, the pope, or any intermediary. They would have direct access to God and could lead their own spiritual journey. And so, these teachings were suppressed, hidden away in secret libraries, and destroyed wherever possible. But what about the influence of governments? Throughout history, governments have understood the power of religion to shape public opinion and maintain control. The Roman Empire, for example, adopted Christianity as a state religion in the 4th century, but only after it was modified to align with the emperor's power. The early church, under Emperor Constantine, had to agree to certain changes in the Bible and doctrine to consolidate imperial authority. This didn't just affect the content of the Bible. It affected how the Bible was used. Religious teachings became tools for political control. For example, the concept of eternal damnation, which didn't exist in the original Hebrew or Greek texts, was introduced to keep the masses in line. The fear of hell was a powerful tool for controlling behavior and suppressing dissent. Even in the medieval period, the Catholic Church played a significant role in maintaining political power. The Vatican became not just a religious institution, but a political entity with vast control over lands, wealth, and governments. Those who dared to challenge the Church's authority were often excommunicated, persecuted, or even executed. But the manipulation didn't stop there. In the modern era, with the rise of nation-states, governments and religions continued to work together to keep the masses ignorant of their true spiritual power. The Bible remained a tool to justify authority and obedience, not a guide to personal freedom and divine empowerment. One of the most egregious examples of this suppression is the modern translation of the Bible. Many modern translations have been edited and revised to align with political and theological agendas. Certain passages are downplayed, misinterpreted, or entirely omitted to prevent the reader from understanding the original intent of the scriptures. In the King James Bible, for example, the term soul is used to refer to a person's spiritual essence, but in the original Hebrew, the word nephesh refers to a living being, not an immortal soul. The idea that the soul is eternal and separate from the body was introduced by philosophers, not Jesus or his apostles. The Bible was altered to fit a narrative of eternal separation from the body, a narrative that has kept people afraid of death and dependent on the church. This process of altering and controlling religious texts has endured for centuries. But now, the truth is beginning to emerge. The time for silence is over. The time for awakening has arrived. As we uncover the truth about the Bible's manipulation, the question remains, what do we do with this knowledge now? For centuries, the Bible has been the foundation of belief for billions of people. It has been the source of hope, guidance, and inspiration. But it has also been used as a tool for control, to suppress knowledge and keep people in the dark about their true spiritual power. We have uncovered the cover-ups, the alterations, and the hidden truths about the Bible, truths that the church and governments have tried to bury. But the real question is, why are these truths so dangerous? The answer is simple. Because the truth sets you free. When you realize that you are divine, when you understand that God lives within you, when you understand that you have direct access to the Creator, you no longer need anyone to tell you how to live, what to believe, or how to worship. That is the real reason why the Bible was altered. That is why certain books were hidden and certain teachings were erased. Because those in power fear what happens when people wake up to their true potential. When people realize that they are spiritual beings with the ability to tap into divine knowledge, it undermines the control of the church, the state, and any institution that seeks to keep people in a state of ignorance and subjugation. But the truth is undeniable. The lost books, the hidden teachings, and the suppressed scriptures are coming to light, and they are awakening those who are ready to receive them. In the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus says, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you." This is the key to spiritual freedom. It's not about worshiping from a distance. It's about awakening the divine within you. This knowledge is already inside of you. It always has been. The Bible, in its true form, is meant to remind you of your divine nature. It's not a set of rules to follow blindly, but a guide to awakening your inner light. The real mystery is not what has been hidden in the Bible, but why it was hidden in the first place. The truth has always been there, waiting for you to discover it. And now, as the veil lifts, the choice is yours. Will you continue to live under the illusion that you are separate from God? Or will you awaken to the truth that you are one with the divine? The Bible, in its true form, is not a book of secrets, but a book of empowerment. It is a blueprint for awakening, a guide to remembering who you truly are. And once you understand this, there is no limit to what you can achieve. The time for control is over. The time for awakening is now. So, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you continue to be controlled? Or will you step into your power and reclaim your spiritual inheritance? The truth is within you. The Bible is not a book of the past. It is a living guide, waiting for you to read it and unlock its full potential. The time for ignorance is over. The time for awakening has